Hey yo, it's your girl Maggie,
And Ariel.
and you're listening to Cheese for Thought. We've finally made it to the last part of this case. I'm very surprised as to how short-lived part 3 was, but this one is going to be around the same length, I think. Don't quote me though, because I clearly have zero concept of time. Thank you to all our loyal listeners that have stuck with us this far. We appreciate you all greatly.
Shout out to Bobby Joe again.
Whoop whoop! Y'all ready for this? Dance
break.
All right, I'm done screwing around. Cindy Paulson, who was only 17 years old, was the last known victim of Robert's. Cindy was a prostitute who Robert had offered a great deal of money to for sex. On June 13th, Robert took Cindy to his family home while his wife and kids were off on holiday. When they first got to his place, they had a drink together and made small talk for a bit.
I thought you were going to say they made s'mores. I was like, what a weird, bizarre thing. They made s'mores together. I'm like, oh, okay.
I'll take some s'mores.
Mm-hmm.
Robert then led Cindy down to his basement.
Oh, God.
Where she immediately saw chains attached to a pillar in the middle of the room.
So this is new. He hasn't done this with anybody else, right? I've never heard a pillar before.
No.
Okay.
And maybe he has. It just wasn't
brought
great,
up or
wasn't
okay.
in great detail.
Okay.
Immediately after spotting what she did, Robert grabbed her by the hair aggressively and dragged her over to the chains, forced her into a squatting position, and looped the chain around her neck enough so that she was immobile.
It's like a dog almost.
Yeah.
Like to a fence post.
Right. Like, and he couldn't, like the dog couldn't move, but
yeah.
she couldn't move. Right. As much as she tried to flee him, once the chain was around her neck, there wasn't anything she could do to escape. Taking his time, Robert then stripped her of her clothing, carefully folded them up, setting them on the floor beneath them. I found that very interesting when I read it.
And bizarre. What a weird, to take the time to see them fold their clothes and stuff. That's so weird.
Isn't it really weird? Very, very peculiar, I wrote. From there, he tortured, raped, and sexually assaulted Cindy. She seemed to notice that Robert had more pleasure in inflicting pain upon her than anything else. After Robert was satisfied, he calmly dressed himself back up again and stood back up for a bit to admire. He stood back up and back, and he just stared at her, admiring her, bound up
After
and
what
naked.
He did to her.
Yeah, fucking creepy. And then he walked over to a couch that was pushed up against the wall of the basement and laid down and took a nap. So he's
what a weird chain of events.
I know, isn't this paint a very bizarre picture? When Robert woke up hours later, he picked up a pistol from where it had been last hidden, undid the chains around Cindy's body, and directed her with his gun for her to get dressed. So he's holding a gun to her head, or to her, saying all right,
get going,
waving
whatever.
at the clothes, get dressed. Cindy clothed herself at gunpoint, and once she was fully dressed, Robert led her back out to his car, where he laid her across the back seat without any restraints aside from the handcuffs wrapped around her wrists.
Okay.
So that's all she had to restrain her. Cindy assumed that Robert was taking her back to the place where he first picked her up, but to her surprise, they headed in a direction that wasn't towards that location. From the back seat, she could tell that they were headed towards Merrill Field Airstrip. Upon arrival, Hansen drove right up to the side of his plane and proceeded to load it, which a security guard became a little suspicious and took note of his plane's tags.
Okay, so this is promising.
Yes, this will become vital information later, so please keep this in the back of your head for now.
I'm jotting this down.
All right, good. While Hansen was loading up the plane, Cindy escaped the vehicle and ran for her life.
And she's still handcuffed at this point. You never let her go with that.
She's still handcuffed,
okay.
Correct.
Okay.
To which Robert had no clue because During the commute over to the airfield, she'd worked off her sneakers off her feet and shoved them under the passenger side seat. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word. In hopes that if she did go to authorities, she could say, I was there. Look underneath his, passenger side seat. To kind of back her stuff up.
Oh, smart.
So there was proof of her being there.
Very, very smart.
So without soles on her feet as she ran, she was able to be much more quiet in her escape. Although her soles had to be burning up pretty badly from the gravel beneath her.
But that is a small price to pay considering what could have happened.
Oh, for sure. And she did flee him. She got rid of him. She escaped him. So Cindy Paulson was spotted by a trucker whose name was Robert Yount.
Oh, that's weird. Same name. First name.
That's so funny. I have this next. I'm like, crazy that his name was also Robert. That's really funny.
Yeah, that's just bizarre. I'm like, so Robert kidnapped you and then a Robert saved you.
Yes, I would be scared shitless.
That's weird.
Like, Robert, I don't know if I trust you, guy.
No, right.
So he spotted her with a handcuff around her wrist. So that's how we know she still had him on. Yount was kind enough to pick her up and give her a ride to a motel. Once the two arrived to the motel, Yount told her to call the police. For obvious reasons, Cindy was reluctant to get authorities involved. Even though what Robert had done to her was illegal, so was prostitution.
Oh, yeah, so she didn't want to turn herself in and,
Right.
Okay.
So she had no idea if the cops would listen to her story and go after the man responsible for trying to kill her.
Or victim blame her because she was doing
exactly,
prostitution.
or lock her up the second they found out she was a prostitute. She didn't know. I wouldn't have known either.
Yeah, right. I wouldn't have known what to do.
Once inside the inn, Cindy pleaded with the clerk to let her call her boyfriend to come get her. Yount continued out his route until he came across a public phone to where he called the police and told them everything he knew about the handcuffed and disheveled girl that he just rescued.
I think he did the right thing, or what he thought he was doing was the right thing.
Yeah, and I think it is the right thing.
Yeah, I can't blame him.
Right, I'm just gonna take a little.
Because I think, honestly, if I was to pick up a hitchhiker or saw someone on the side of the road that looks suspicious, like this chick has handcuffs, she doesn't have shoes.
Oh, and I'm sure she has, like, marks all over her body.
because she was hit and stuff, and Oh,
I'm sure she did not look good. The Anchorage Police Department sent out a squad car as soon as they received his call.
Actually, not to stop you here, but too, imagine this. What if he didn't know if she was telling the truth and he thought she had escaped because she was handcuffed?
Oh, that's true.
So maybe he thought she could have been some...
That's true. I didn't even think of that.
Escaped crazy person.
That's
true. That the cops had or something. So it's a good thing he did call, because maybe she could have been someone else. How is he supposed to know she's telling the truth?
Yeah, you wouldn't know.
With handcuffs.
Yeah. You make a very reasonable point, because I never even thought of that.
I'm Team Robert the second.
Yeah.
Not the first guy.
Oh, obviously
The first guy's an asshole, but the second Robert I like.
The first one can fuck off.
Yeah.
As far as we're concerned.
Robert 2, well, cool.
Yeah, he seems like a nice guy. Given the amount of women in the sex trade who'd gone missing over the past few years, the truck driver's report was taken very seriously and treated with the respect it deserved. So I'm very happy to see that. So the cops
actually upheld their
Right, you don't see this
here.
often, so this is great.
Right.
Even though the police department was quick to the scene, they arrived too late. The same clerk Cindy spoke to explained to the officers that she tried to get a hold of her boyfriend without any luck, so she instead called a taxi to take her home to the Big Timber. It was where she was staying. The same officers then sped over to follow Cindy to her home, got her room number from the clerk, and banged on the door. She didn't answer.
Oh, jeez.
When they said, open up, it's the police, she still refused to open her door. Eventually, the cops went back to the clerk and asked them to unlock the door for them. Upon entering the room, they saw Cindy curled up in the corner, shivering in terror and freezing, still handcuffed.
That poor girl.
I know. She was taken down to the station, despite her protests of not knowing anything. And slowly, she did tell her story. It took a lot of patience for them to finally get Cindy to spill. They removed the cuffs around her wrist and stored them in evidence. From Cindy's story and the information of the plane, authorities then went to the airfield and were able to get the plague's tags information, including Robert's name and address.
So he left his plane there even?
Well, remember the guy jotted down his
tags. That's right.
Right,
okay.
So like when they talked to the...
So security guard came in clutch here too?
That's where it came back, yeah.
Okay.
So the police went to the airfield, talked to the security guard. He's like, hey, I noticed this plane from earlier. Here's his tags. They take it back to the station, run the tags, and they find everything. Yeah, so when the police went to confront Robert, he quickly denied any involvement and told...
Of course he would.
Yeah. He's a monster. I just know some sick stuff coming up.
Great.
So he denied any involvement and told them that Cindy Paulson was attempting to extort money from him because she found out about his criminal past and was using that information as a means to apply pressure on him. That was his excuse. Cops believed Robert and came to the conclusion that Cindy could have falsely accused Robert and staged her own abduction. Obviously, Robert's word alone wasn't going to be enough to clear him of any suspicion, so he needed an alibi.
Is this where the shoes come in? She put those shoes there for a reason.
You'll find out.
Okay.
Even that is a bust.
For the love of Pete.
We'll get into that later. Robert claimed that he and his friend, John Henning, were out hunting together at the time that the lying hooker was accusing him of abducting her.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, real nice. Nice touch. An officer was dispatched to Henning's home, and John confirmed Hansen's story. So the alibi that Robert gave, his friend is agreeing to, saying, yes, I was with him out hunting in the woods.
And here, I bet the friend probably didn't... I'm hoping the friend didn't actually know what he was doing, and he thought he was just covering up for his friend.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened here.
Oh, thank God. Okay,
yeah.
So it wasn't like he was actually knew that he was a sick...
No, he
crazy
did not know.
Lunatic, and he was making stuff up.
Right, that's exactly what happened.
So he thought he was just covering for his best friend.
Right, just like say something happened with you, and like the police came, and then like, no, she was here, because I wouldn't think you would do what they're telling you. Nor did.
Would I? Yes,
right,
I would never do that.
Right.
But yes.
So yeah, I would have done the same thing. You're my best friend. Thankfully, Cindy wasn't the only one that Robert had hurt, and over the course of the past few years, more and more bodies that he'd left behind were being discovered. Even though a lot of them remained undiscovered, there was still enough that had been found that there was a team put together of Alaskan state troopers who had reason to investigate Hansen further.
Okay.
Detective Glenn Floth was the one who was most convinced that they had a serial killer on their hands. And because of that, he was the one who proceeded to treat the case involving Cindy the way it deserved to be treated. Gathering up all the evidence that he could, he reached out to the Federal Bureau of Investigation for assistance. After some time, he was put in contact with the Behavioral Analysis Unit. At this time, John Douglas, who was the founder of the unit and one of the creators of criminal profiling as we know it today, became in contact with Detective Floth. Upon examining all the evidence, Douglas provided a profile on the perpetrator of all of the crimes.
I feel like this is an episode of like CSI right now.
I know. It's kind of interesting too, like how spot on this profile is. The results were that the perpetrator's profile would fit those of a white male who was an experienced hunter with a long history of rejection by women. It was also concluded that the assailant would look normal enough to avoid being noticed, but he'd have some sort of defect that had a negative impact on both his self-esteem and romantic prospects, something that was entirely outside of his control. It was presumed to be something relatively minor that the perpetrator had blown entirely out of perspective, such as a lisp or a stutter.
How the hell did they figure that out?
I don't know.
Especially the white. How do they know the person's white? Like how? I can understand the rejection thing because clearly he's targeting women. So
it's like literally spot on. They got nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Additionally,
they're like, oh, and also he might be a baker. But like we're just guessing.
They didn't say that, but that would be interesting.
I'm just saying that's just crazy. How spot on that was.
Yeah. Additionally, the profile contained the belief that the assailant likely used a plane to get around to more isolated areas to kill his victims. It was also thought that he collected trophies from his victims so he could revisit the memory of their murder.
Yeah, this is actually crazy. They pretty
literally
much summed him
everything.
Up exactly word for word.
Isn't that crazy? So they did a great job.
So I'll give them props for that.
With the combination of this profile and Cindy Paulson's testimony involving a plane, the state police were able to secure a warrant from a judge to search Robert Hansen's plane, home, vehicle, all of it, on October 27th, 1983. They found nothing incriminating in his plane, but his flight records did match up to the supposed dates that several discovered bodies were calculated to have been left behind.
Okay.
He
done fucked up is what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. This is where the part where it's like, her shoes were not there. His car was searched. Cindy's shoes were nowhere to be found.
So he got rid of them. Yeah,
it's safe to assume that Robert had been forewarned about impending searches and took care of things prior. So that's what it's thought to. Yeah, I do too. He was organized to such a pathological degree, which made him excel in the bakery, but difficult to live with otherwise. They put that in the book, and I just thought it was interesting, give a visual. I'm like, yeah, he would be fucking hard to live with if he's like that. You know,
oh yeah.
Like, I don't know what the word is, like specific,
particular and whatnot. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. The intensive search of his home turned up some more interesting evidence. His basement had the pillar that Cindy's testimony described, along with the chains, though an argument could be made that those were normal to find in someone's basement. And
what?
And I don't know.
Okay, pillars maybe, but chains on the pillar? Who the hell has that in their basement?
I'm like, what would you even use to chain? Up beside your dog to the lawn?
A plant? What?
I don't know.
That doesn't make sense.
I know. I thought that was interesting, but yeah.
So I'm going to say, okay, so they can pinpoint his exact profile, but oh yeah, it's fine. Some chains, a pillar, whatever, the norm.
Sorry, I needed a drink.
That just doesn't make sense to me.
I know.
And I guess, too, I was going to say I'm surprised his wife didn't suspect anything, but I imagine this was probably when she was on vacation or something with the kids. Okay.
Right. What couldn't be considered as normal was the fact that Robert created several hiding spots in the home where items related to his crimes could be securely hidden from his family. In the corner of his attic, tucked behind some beams, were some firearms, including a numerous amount of pistols and the .223 caliber Ruger Mini 14 semi-automatic rifle, that's a mouthful, that he'd used to kill several of his victims.
So it's not weird that a hunter has a stash of guns, but it's weird. It's not weird that he has chains in his basement.
Right.
Okay.
Make it make sense.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense, but all right.
Ballistics couldn't prove that this was the exact weapon used due to the amount of time that had passed, where the used shell casing had been exposed to the harsh elements, but it was certainly the same type of weapon.
Okay. So at least there's something.
Right. And now not a very common one at that. So this weapon isn't a common one people would use.
Especially in Alaska, too. It's how many of the people there actually are gun owners? I mean...
I don't know. Maybe a lot, because it sounds like they hunt a lot there.
Yeah, that's true, I guess. I just always feel like there's not that many people that live there. So I'm like, you really think they narrow this down? How many people actually own this gun?
Right.
Or a similar type? Probably 4.
Yeah, so it's got to be easier to track down. But yeah, okay. So, and lo and behold, amongst all of his ammunition boxes, there was another box. One containing not ammunition, but jewelry.
His trophies.
Authorities knew there were 3 dead women at this point, and they knew they needed to find a piece of jewelry for each one. But the vast amount crammed into that one little box made it much more difficult. If every item in that box had been taken as a trophy representing a different woman, then this box amounted to a far more widespread massacre than anyone could have imagined. After sifting through it all at the station, witnesses who knew the dead victims that had already been discovered came in to identify some of the items. So this obviously now tied Robert to the crimes. As a result of the raid on Robert's home, they had him in custody.
Okay.
When they brought these pieces of jewelry to his attention, he denied everything. Piece by piece in little plastic bags, each piece of jewelry was brought in by him. Photographs of the victim wearing said piece of jewelry were also shown to Robert. There was a very clear connection between Robert and these women. Robert had a criminal history involving brutalizing prostitutes, and he had a plane, which was a vital object that would be needed to commit such crimes as the ones he's being accused of. Not to mention his outstanding hunting skills. Literally all angles pointed straight to him. Yet despite all of it, he denied.
Well, of course he would. Why would he be honest at this point?
Right.
He's a manipulator.
Oh, yeah.
He'll do whatever it takes to get out of the situation.
Meanwhile, the search of his house was still in motion. His family was shuffled from room to room while sobbing at their picturesque home. while sobbing as their picturesque home turned into a crime scene before their very eyes.
Oh, yeah, because they never suspected any of this.
No.
His wife had no clue about any of it.
No, none of them did. As more and more little pieces of circumstantial evidence were being stitched together, Darla didn't believe a word she was hearing. There was no way that Robert was responsible for any of the crimes he was being accused for. There wasn't a chance in hell he was capable of murder. A man of faith could never break one of the most sacred commandments. Darla tried to plead with the police not to search their bedroom that she and her husband shared and to leave them that tiny scrap of privacy and decency. If there had been anything out of the ordinary, she'd surely have noticed it. So that's how Darla...
Okay, well, the thing is that of course you want to believe that your husband's not guilty of this.
Right.
Of course. Understandable. Right. However, screw your privacy. No.
Right.
And that's the thing too.
And that's
like,
exactly what ends up happening.
And here's the thing too. I love how she says, like, if something happened, she would know. Well,
but would you have?
Clearly not, though, because it did happen, and you had no suspicion whatsoever.
Right.
This all goes back to show that he is a master manipulator.
He
no
sure
blame
is.
on her or the kids, whatever, but master manipulator.
Yep. It's
and he's
quite
dang good
sickening.
at it.
Yeah.
That's the scary part.
That's
he's good
very
at
scary.
it.
Yeah. When you're that good at it,
mm-hmm.
Not good. It was apparent to everyone involved that Darla didn't have any involvement in Hansen's crimes.
For sure.
But that didn't mean they could trust her word. She had a strong interest in keeping her husband out of jail, even though he was a murderer. So they began tearing the room apart. They found nothing in Robert's drawers, checking for any bloodstains on his clothing, hidden trinkets, or papers that might have helped tie together the timeline that they'd been working on to track his movements. They found nothing. They then moved on to Darla's drawers, raking through her intimates, leaving them scattered throughout the room as she wept by the doorway. Nothing turned up when they flipped their mattress. Whatever hope they had of finding something substantial enough to break Robert in the interrogation room had rapidly been slipping away. This was the last room in the house that needed to be searched. The basement had been bleached clean of any evidence to support Cindy's testimony, and while everything they'd found thus far was sufficient enough to convince them of his guilt, it may not have been enough to convince a jury and his peers.
They don't think it was weird that he suddenly bleached the basement?
Right. Red flag.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, I thought the same thing. Frustrated, with good reason, one of the cops turned to walk out of the room too quickly and stubbed his toe on their bed frame. From behind the headboard, there came a thump.
Aha!
All the cops looked at one another, then came together to pull the bed frame away from the wall, revealing an aeronautical map that Robert had stowed away behind the headboard. Rolling their eyes at each other, most of them simply went back to work and thought nothing of said map. But one cop opened it and studied it. It was just like any other aeronautical map that any pilot might keep in their plane.
Yes, not hide behind their bed.
Right. The only distinctive difference about this map was the tiny X marks that had been scribbled in pen throughout it by Robert. It only took a moment for the cop to figure it out before he ran to the lead detective in charge. The victims that they had found all coincided with one of the crosses on his map. When the interrogator in the room with Robert paused to take a step outside and collect more evidence, there wasn't a change in his demeanor at all. Robert had been declaring his innocence for the duration of the interrogation without any change in his persona. He had done nothing wrong, and they didn't have any evidence, otherwise he would have been charged by now. He had an alibi for the attempted kidnapping, so he couldn't have done the things they were claiming he had.
Oh, he's real cocky now.
Oh, he's a
big POS.
Shit I want to say.
A big POS.
But when the interrogator came back in with the map and laid it out in front of Robert, it was then when he realized that the jig was up. This is about to get nasty. I just want to let you guys know.
Okay.
Even if he said nothing, they could go to the locations on the map and find the bodies, lock him up, and throw away the key.
And I hope they do.
Now here's where it gets nasty. Robert took a deep breath to steady himself, and then he spoke without a stutter.
What? Like literally without a stutter?
It's a lot. It's coming at you right now. This is word for word in his book. Those bitches had it coming. Every one of them deserved it. They were whores, leeches on society, a disease. He had done the cops a favor by getting rid of them. This one tried to claw out his eyes when he took what he paid when he took what he'd paid for. This one had taken off running with his money. What was he meant to do? Let them maul him and rob him? If they'd been good girls, they never would have been in this situation to start with. They were criminals, evil fallen women. When he shot one of them, he was doing the world a greater service than all of the food that he could put on all the tables around town with his usual hunting. He had done nothing wrong. He was just like them, just one of the guys. It was the women. They were the problem. They were the liars, the cheats, the thieves, the whores. He was just a normal guy. He was just trying to keep a roof over his head most of the time. Was it so terrible that he needed to blow off steam once in a while? It wasn't his fault that they wouldn't just take his money and do what they were meant to do. He didn't force them to be bitches. He just dealt out the consequences from them being bitches. I'm done. This is all mentioned word for word, page 97 in Ryan Green's book.
I'm literally, like, speechless.
My heart is, like, pounding so fucking much right now. The second I read this, I wanted to rip the fucking book in half.
So he said that to the cop?
That is what he said to the cop. He literally just flipped us, like, it literally, it was like he was bipolar.
I was gonna say, and he's referring to himself in, like, third person.
Yeah. They deserved it. And then I put here, I'm like, excuse me? Who the hell are you to think you're better than these women who, too, are also making a living for their family?
Yeah.
I hate this man's guts.
Wow, that was a lot.
Do you need a moment?
That was a lot.
Yeah.
That was a lot. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
And then for them to just keep name-calling them and still demeaning them even after he had already killed them.
The second he saw that map, it was just like something flipped in his fucking brain where he just...
Without the stutter thing, too, like, he just talked normal. It's like,
yep.
what? Okay, something, I don't know.
Something is seriously
not right.
wrong with him. Yeah.
Wow.
I was so mad.
Wow.
I still am, like... Alright, so his change came like the flick of a switch, like I said, and actually stunned the police.
It stunned us!
Right?
Yeah.
Most of whom knew Robert socially from hunting clubs or from visits at his bakery. Hansen had always been so quiet and nervous that none of them even had the faintest suspicion that he could contain such hatred and rage towards women.
See, it's the people you least expect.
I know.
And then the thing, too, going back to that, the fact that he's just like, what's wrong with blowing off steam? Okay, there's a difference between blowing off steam and raping and killing someone because you're mad. Okay,
exactly.
Buddy. Okay, buddy.
Fucked up, dude.
Wow.
Just admit something's wrong with you. That is not to say that there weren't some amongst the local police who agreed with him, just that they never would have suspected it out of Robert, who they thought to be harmless. So some of them, did view women of, that...
Of lesser value and
exactly.
stuff? Exactly.
Yeah. And even prostitutes, too. Like, they viewed him the same way he did, but they did not
see... Yeah, they didn't kill him, and
Right.
Yeah.
They did not see this coming out of him.
Right.
Now that he made excuses for his actions, and it was all recorded on audio tape to be replayed in court as often as required to secure his prosecution, they now had what they needed to lock his ass up. But of course, now that they had him for the 3 crimes he was suspected of committing, they now had to move on to far more daunting tasks of securing his confessions for each of the other crosses on his map. Now, with his back against the wall, as he was shown each item of jewelry, this time he started confessing. His confessions accounted for a spree of sexual assaults going all the way back to 1971, when Robert and his family first arrived in Alaska. But even still, when he was confronted with all the evidence, he was still evasive. Robert would talk quite readily about raping and assaulting unnamed women, but he only confessed to 4 actual murders. Sherry Morrow, Joanna Messina, Paula Golding, and the Jane Doe that locals had taken to calling Eklutna Annie. Even Robert couldn't provide any useful information that might have helped in her identification.
Yeah, because it shows he doesn't care. He didn't give the slightest crap in the world.
No. Not a chance in hell.
I will say, too, I really hope that they did apologize to the latest victim because of the fact they didn't believe her. So I'm really hoping they redeem themselves here.
I don't know. I don't think they do.
Well, I mean, why would they? They'd have to admit fault. And nobody likes doing that.
I mean, but they handled it with grace, I think, from the start. I'm sure they were, like... I'm hoping they were comforting to her. I hope so. And, like... He actually went as fast as pointing the police in an entirely wrong direction.
Because it's still a game to him.
When he tried to guess her origins. Beyond that, he was charged with the kidnap and rape of Cindy Paulson. Who had been brought into the station to positively identify her attacker, now that the police felt there was sufficient evidence to corroborate her story. So she was brought in, and she did say that was him, and I'm sure she had a panic attack. And
oh, yeah. Okay, so I'm just happy that they validified her story there. And
her shoes that she had abandoned in his car were never recovered. He probably
burned them or whatever, yeah. He got rid of those immediately.
He had disposed of them somewhere out in the wilderness, just like he dumped the property of so many other victims. As interviews with Hansen continued over the course of his ongoing investigation, another crime was added to the docket. While searching his backyard for any signs of evidence, the police had come across what they suspected to be a burial mound, but it was proved to be a heap of Robert's trophies. The very ones that he had reported stolen to commit the insurance fraud mentioned in Part 2.
Okay, so he did get caught for that too, then.
Yes, he did. The insurance company wasn't going to let something like that slide just because their customer had been a mass murderer. So now, not only is he getting charged with the rape and abduction of Cindy and the 4 murder victims, but the insurance company added a fraud charge. Andrea Altieri's distinctive fish necklace was found amongst the other jewelry that had been found, but without a body, it was impossible for the police to charge Robert with Andrea's murder, even though all of her friends were convinced of Robert's guilt. While there are many other murders connect to Robert Hansen in some way, shape, or form, it is important to note that the crimes I just mentioned are the only ones that we can entirely be certain were his handiwork. It is possible that there was another serial killer at large in the great state of Alaska at the time who happened to perfectly replicate the way that Robert hunted his prey, chose his victims, identical to how Robert would have chosen them to.
Yeah, but...
I may not believe it, and you may not believe it, but it's important to know.
Yeah, I was going to say, but how would he end up with all their jewelry then if there was another serial killer?
Exactly. I don't believe that. But it's just important to say...
I mean, there very well could have been, yeah. Right. I mean, and maybe they were, but there could even be more victims that didn't have jewelry. Whatever. Exactly. But I was like, yeah, even if they didn't find the body, it's pretty clear not to speculate or whatever, but it's clear that he did do it if he had their jewelry. I mean, how else would he end up with that?
Who else would have done it?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Who else is this sick? I mean, obviously there's thousands of other people that are sick. We go over these people, but I don't know. That's insane to me.
Isn't it?
That he was only charged for 4 of these people.
For 4, yeah. But there's believed to be 17.
Because
we went in those last one.
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if there's even more.
I think there is more.
I do too.
But we're all entitled to our own opinion.
Even if you're wrong, whatever.
Yeah, we might be wrong, but I do think there's more. In the time leading up to his trial, the media went into a frenzy. Serial killers were now a known phenomenon, and the specific details of Robert's mythology had been leaked to the press. So the fact that he'd hunted women for sport had now become public knowledge. For obvious reasons, this meant that this was going to be difficult to offer him an unbiased trial in the jury. Sorry, I worded that really weird.
No, that's okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
As such, it came as an immense relief to prosecutors when Robert announced that he was willing to take a plea deal. He would plead guilty to the 4 murders that they already had him for and help them decipher his aeronautical map to discover the other bodies, as long as he wouldn't be charged with any further crimes. Additionally, he wanted to be placed in federal prison after his conviction, where they wouldn't allow any press involvement in any of the proceedings. So after a lifetime of feeling ignored and overlooked, Robert now found that he didn't want the attention at all.
Isn't that funny how that worked?
Yeah, and he fucking got it, which makes me mad.
Yeah, what the hell does he get? What he wants? Screw him. I would do the exact opposite of every request he had.
We're doing lots of press.
Exact opposite.
The reason for this sudden change of direction was simple. Ballistics reports came back from the victims that had been found that could conclusively connect Robert's rifle to them. Where before, there was a possibility of reasonable doubt, now there wasn't any. All that the prosecution would need to do to win their case would have to be to convince a jury that the scientific evidence presented was 100% accurate. And in the 80s, getting people to deny science was a more difficult task. With the ballistic evidence, Robert's hopes of steering clear of any consequences, as he had been so lucky of doing for so long,
finally came to an end?
Right, dwindled to nothing. Because of this information, Robert instructed his lawyer to accept the previous ordered deal before the newly acquired damning evidence helped shift to a harsher sentence.
So once again, oh man. He's one step ahead, it seems.
His sentence is bad, but I think he should have had I think they shouldn't have bargained with him at all.
No, I agree.
You can, say you're going to and then don't.
Yeah, that's what I would have said. I would have said, yeah, sure, we'll give you whatever you want. Come clean, and then not do shit.
Exactly. That's what I would have done. That's just me. In the weeks that followed, they uncovered 17 separate graves. 12 of the 17 were entirely unknown to the investigation until Robert guided the police to them. There were still multiple X's on Robert's map that he claimed didn't correlate to any murder he actually committed, including several around Resurrection Bay. Robert denied any involvement in additional graves and murders that are now commonly believed to include Mary Thill and Megan Emmerich. There were a ton of markings on his map that he told investigators he had nothing to do with. He claimed they were places that he'd cited as a good spot to touch down with his plane, or a good place to hunt because he spotted a lot of deer in the area.
And we're supposed to just magically believe this is true.
Yeah. It was certainly true that the various markings were not the simple X marks the spot, so they must have looked different somehow of his burial sites, but that did not mean that there wasn't any correlation between them.
Oh, okay.
And all of the other missing women in Alaska who weren't accounted for still. As a result of his plea deal, Robert felt there wasn't any danger in discussing his crimes, so it was now possible for the police to actually get some answers out of him. He confirmed their theory of how he was abducting women using the cunning ploy to offer money for them to spend time with him, but he provided an additional shocking detail. There were a great many prostitutes beyond the ones that he had killed who he had simply released after his lust had been satisfied. He only killed the women who he believed would report his activities to the police or who had behaved in a defiant manner during their long sessions of rape and sodomy.
So he took a crapshoot on most of these people. He just assumed they wouldn't say anything.
Right. He just used his weak little minded brain, you know. This statement didn't coincide with Cindy Paulson's testimony, who was entirely obedient and submissive towards him during her abduction. He claimed that he judged her not only on her actions during the event, but in the time surrounding it. He admitted to stalking his potential victims ahead of time, which allowed him to plan ahead for those victims that he knew he would have to dispose of. He often made his decision about whether or not they would be considered good girls before ever making any actual contact with them. As a result of the inconsistencies between his testimony and Paulson's, it was suspected that the number of women who he had killed might very well have been considerably higher. All of the prostitutes that he freely admitted to picking up, but claimed to have set free, might very well have been other victims. While attempts were made to gather more information about these women throughout the many interrogations leading up to his trial, there were very few details in Robert's story that would allow their survival to be confirmed. For this reason, the precise number of women that Robert Hansen killed since his spree began in the 1970s is and shall remain unknown. At the time, the police settled on a median number of 37 probable victims based on the evidence and testimony that they had managed to secure.
That's awfully different than 4.
And 17. Yeah. So yeah, that's their number there.
So in a way, in the end, he still gets away with things. Mm-hmm. Because truly, I just that makes me so mad because all the families and friends that didn't get justice for their friend that died at the hands of him, allegedly, whatever.
Yeah, I talk about that too. Here soon. When his day in court came, it was not the moment that any of the families of his victims had been hoping for. There was no sense of relief that their daughter's killer was being punished because even now, everything was happening according to his plan.
Yeah, right. He got what he wanted.
The press was held from the courtroom, an arrangement that had been quietly made behind closed doors. When he received a sentence of 461 years without any possibility of parole, it was thought that it'd give the families, or the victim's family, some sense of victory, but that was not the case. Although Robert Hansen wouldn't be able to harm any further women, there were still so many dead and so many more families out there who felt the same pain but would never have any sense of closure. Mm-hmm. Just because Robert had decided not to share any further details of his murders.
So he's being selfish up till the end.
Oh, he was.
100%.
Robert Hansen was confined in federal prison in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania until 1988, until construction had been completed on the Lemon Creek Correctional Center in Juneau, returning him to Alaska. After a brief stay there, he had moved to Spring Creek Correctional Center in Seward, just a little south of Anchorage. The exact reason for Robert's relocations weren't clear, though it is possible that the intention was to place him near his family so they could more easily visit him.
Okay.
For many years, Darla and the kids continued to live in Anchorage. Since Darla was the breadwinner for the family's financial situation wasn't impacted, thankfully.
Yeah, I will say, thank God for that.
Robert had been living an almost entirely independent lifestyle, using his own funds solely for his own entertainment and contributing nothing. So on the financial side of things, Darla wasn't really missing out on much, thank God. But of course, Darla and the children's reputation had been torn to shreds.
Oh, and plus, too, she missed out on years with her husband. Their kids missed out on years with their dad.
I do think it's bullshit, though. I put here, it's not fair for her to, like, their reputations to be torn.
Yeah, they didn't know. It's not like they knew and went with it.
Right,
yeah.
I said he kept this part of his life such a big secret.
And he was good at it.
He was really good at it. Starla, she's a star.
Yeah, she is.
Darla stood by Robert throughout the entire trial, and to many people, in particular, their friends and family, this meant that she was just as bad as him. I think this is bullshit, too.
Yeah, I disagree with that.
It's in her beliefs to forgive no matter what, and that shouldn't be held against her. This is just me personally saying, because the average person would never and could never, cough, cough, guilty as charged. I would not forgive him, but you can't, diss on her for forgiving him.
Well, the thing is, too, it's hard, too, to really say what you would do. God forbid, we'll never be put in that situation that she was in. We'll never know what it's like to have kids with someone that's like that, or to spend half your life with that person. I mean, we'll never be in that situation. So it's hard to kind of correlate how you would react and what you'd say, or even try to imagine being in her shoes, because we'll never be in that situation.
Right. I'd like to say I wouldn't stand by my husband, but who knows?
Who knows? If you were in that situation, maybe you would.
Right,
I don't know.
Would. If it was Drew, I'd be by his side. So it's like, it's hard to... Yeah.
It's hard to really say or even think about, because we'll never be in that. We'll never, ever have to go through what she or her kids had to go through.
Right. It's
true. And we are lucky for that.
It's very true. Yeah. I hope I never do. Drew,
Drew,
don't let me down.
Yeah.
So after the trial was complete, Darla sought out legal counsel and began divorce proceedings. And even then, it was only because she had learned that there was no possibility of Robert ever getting out of jail in her lifetime. So she probably would have stayed with him. It seems like.
Well, that also, I'm assuming, too, I don't know if they said she was Catholic or not, but that is against her religion, I think, to divorcing, so.
Her values and ideals had made her more vulnerable to Robert's manipulations than anyone.
That's true. She also is kind of a victim of this whole thing, too. She was manipulated and lied to this whole time.
For real. And then I said it's reasonable to think that this was something that had attracted Robert to her in the first place.
Because she was like an easy target for him,
Right, the fact that despite being a well-educated and intelligent woman, she always had a blind spot when it came to her husband. And she was very loyal to him,
And she almost had like an emotional weakness to him, too, a little bit.
Yeah. I feel like we all do.
Yeah, of course.
Spouses,
well, that's just it. Yeah, but he probably took advantage of that.
Oh, you can tell he did. Yeah, like let her leave, take the kids to go out of town.
And even in the earlier parts, you said stuff was affecting their sex life and everything like that. So it's I think maybe it was
after. Knew. Yeah, it was after the prostitute and then the house.
Right. So she even knew that he was still cheating on her, and she still stood by his side. So she, in a way, she was a victim as well.
Right. Yeah, she definitely was. Once the divorce was complete, Robert firmly believed that she was entitled to the house and any assets.
So he didn't put up a fight with that, you mean?
Nope, he gave her everything, which is good. I mean, he's not going to live to be outside anyway.
Still being a douche and...
That's true.
Why not? So I'm glad that he was able to do that for her, at least. That's the bare minimum he owed her.
Right. After the divorce was final, Darla started making plans to permanently leave Alaska. For the several years that followed, the location of his family became a carefully guarded secret as they tried to reestablish their lives. His daughter attended college in Arkansas, where it seems that the family settled for a while. She lived a very private life, but she unfortunately inherited her father's stutter. Darla continued to teach and care for children, but she moved away from caring for the disabled as she grew older and less physically capable of handling students who needed hands-on care, instead offering music lessons. When attention once again shone on Robert's case in the early 2000s as a result of the increased public interest in true crime and multiple mass media projects focusing on him, including a Nicolas Cage and John Cusack movie called The Frozen Ground. I know I mentioned this in part 1. The family moved on once again. The last unconfirmed report is from 2018, and it suggests that Darla actually moved to Russia, where she had taken up full-time teaching once more to support herself. For Robert's son, there has never been little trace, and it seems likely that he changed his name and moved away from the family at the earliest opportunity.
I can't blame him there.
I can't either.
And see, the thing is, too, is I think a lot of people, like, it's great that they do bring awareness to stuff like this. They make movies and stuff, but people don't really think about the aftermath of what happens to their surviving family.
Right.
And that's why it's like people do have to go into this with a gentle and, I want to say, compassionate and open mind, because the monster is the person, not their family, too. Right. Most of the time, the family has nothing to do with it, but they are, like, hazed and harassed afterwards.
Which is so sad. Like I said earlier, like, Darla should not be,
shouldn't
been shunned by her friends.
But unfortunately, it's very
church.
common. People want to know answers. They have questions. They're nosy.
But they didn't even know that he was doing this, so they can't answer any of the questions they have. So just leave them the fuck alone.
I know.
I don't get it.
People, you know how people are.
Right. It's like, I had no idea my husband was like this. Can you just shut the fuck up and leave me alone?
Yeah, right.
Like, that's what I would do.
If only it was that simple.
I know.
But it sucks that if she truly did have to leave the country and move to Russia, I mean, that's terrible. But
I just hope she's having a better life, there. Hopefully, if that is truly where she ended up, I really hope she's.
And I can't blame the son for wanting to not be in the spotlight there. I don't blame him.
Me neither. I hope he's happy too.
Did it say? Are his kid still alive? I don't know. Is he still alive?
Robert is not alive. I'll get into that.
Oh, okay.
In keeping with Robert's last demand for privacy from the press, he did what he could to draw as little attention to him as possible. While most other serial killers attempt to appeal their conviction as many times as allowable by law, Robert simply came to terms with his conviction.
Oh, so he didn't even try to fight it.
He did not. He refused media interviews despite almost certain constant demands of them. In fact, only the Behavioral Analysis Unit of the FBI ever had the opportunity to interview him for their studies. Throughout his years of confinement, there were several occasions where Robert befriended a cellmate or other prisoner where he'd let some details slip about his crimes that were unknown to the police. These incidents were often reported with the hope that the one making these reports might have received some favorable treatment in prison. It is from these unsubstantiated reports that it has been possible to construct a larger picture of Robert's murderous spree. Many of the crimes that he'd committed left behind no physical evidence that has been discovered, and we only have the hearsay to confirm or deny the many allegations held against him throughout the years.
And props to those people for turning in those tips. Granted, maybe it was for selfish benefits, but hey, screw it. You might have helped something.
Right. You gotta speak up, even if you think it's nothing. It might be something.
Right.
With age, Robert's health started to decline. A lifetime without...
Music to my ears.
A lifetime without proper sleep had put immense stress on his body, and slowly but surely, his bodily system started to fail.
Good. So does this mean he's crapping himself every day?
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, let's paint that picture for the audience. This guy's crapping himself, peeing himself.
I hope so.
Laying in his own filth. I love this. This is great.
In May 2014, he was transferred to the Anchorage Correctional Complex so that he could receive more medical care.
No! Why does he get access to medical care? Screw this guy.
Then Spring Creek could provide, but even that wasn't sufficient enough to preserve him any further.
Good.
Robert was transferred to Alaska Regional Hospital in Anchorage in August and finally died on August 21st, 2014 at the age of 75. An autopsy determined he died of natural causes, and no further investigation was required. Work has continued since his death. Sorry, my throat itches.
I didn't realize it was that long ago. Wow, 2014. So we're talking, what, 11 years now he's been dead?
Mm-hmm.
That's wild.
That is kind of wild.
Although, to be honest, I didn't even know he had died until you said that. I was trying my hardest not to Google it. So when I Googled to see what he looked like,
that's hard.
I automatically went to image it, so I didn't see any information.
Yeah, it's hard to do because you get so curious. I'm like, I want to know what happened next.
I will say, when I Googled him, you are right. He did look very normal, and I could see why people would go for him. He wasn't bad looking for the time.
He definitely wasn't. So work has continued since his death to identify the remains of the victims that he left behind. More bodies have been discovered and identified, with the timeline of their death and the manner of their killing tying into Robert's hunting trips. Advances in forensic science have allowed genetic testing to be used on some of the bodies, allowing some long overdue identification, giving the dead their names back, and giving their families a small bit of closure. Throughout all of it, Eklutna Annie has remained something of a mystery. Advances in biomedical analysis helped investigators to reach the conclusion that she had likely originated in California, as evidenced by the balance of certain proteins and materials found in her system. But with the destruction of her face, the usual methods used to identify a dead person have been left with nothing to work from. She was believed to be between the ages of 16 and 25. White, with possible Native American ancestry, and thought to be between 4 feet 11 inches and 5'1". Her hair was long and light brown with a red tint. She had been found wearing a brown leather jacket, knit sweater, jeans, red knee-high, high-heeled boots, a wide copper bracelet with turquoise stones, a beaded turquoise necklace, gold earrings, a gold ring with a white stone, and a gold Timex watch was found near her body but not around her wrist. In her jacket was a box of Salem matches. Numerous reconstructions of her face have been made over the years. Pictures have been sketched based on the available information, along with sculpted busts and three-dimensional visuals, all reliant upon cutting-edge forensic science. Her genetic material has never been successfully matched to any missing person or even to anyone in any genetic testing system offered commercially or publicly in the USA. She remains a ghost, buried under the name John Doe, with nobody to mourn her, or even to know who she was before Robert Hansen snatched her life away for his own sick amusement. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children still has a listed posted for her, providing a full and detailed account of what little was known about her. Just want to put that in there. This is the only one who is not known.
I almost wonder, too, perhaps that she came, if she was 25 when it happened, maybe she came here from a different country.
Yeah.
If she has some sort of...
That's true.
I don't know. But that's sad. I do feel like maybe we can mourn a little bit for her.
I know. I have goosebumps.
Yeah, we don't have to know her name or anything like that, but we can mourn for her. And I hope our listeners do, too. Think of her for a little bit. Yeah. The little we know about her. Right. And hope that maybe someday someone will come forward. I mean, maybe her parents were already deceased. Maybe she was an orphan. I mean, who knows? She could have been in the system somewhere.
It's just crazy. Nobody...
reported her missing.
Nothing tied back. That's just crazy.
I still have hope. I mean, the boy in the box was
you gotta
solved
keep it.
75 years later. Maybe she will one day be discovered.
Hey, sometimes that little bit helps. Just holding on to that little bit of hope.
Yeah.
All right. From birth, Robert had been formed into a beastly animal. He'd been deprived of sleep, browbeaten, and yelled at constantly to ensure his compliance. He'd been incapable of forming natural social bonds and was only rewarded for his talent of killing animals at such a young age. It should come as no surprise that Robert ended up an outcast with no interest in fitting into civilization. The wilderness was the only place he felt safe and as if he belonged somewhere. His being unable to speak was a massive impediment in civilization, but out in the wild, his silence was his greatest advantage. When he was on the hunt, Robert felt powerful in a way that society could never have allowed him to feel. And so, like an animal, he sought the things that brought him pleasure and avoided the things that caused him pain, and thought very little about either. One of them beyond that very moment he was in. When he raped and tortured, it felt good, so he didn't care about the long-lasting harm he was inflicting upon his victims. When he hunted and killed, he didn't have empathy. Whether he truly didn't feel a hint of remorse or if he crushed it in fear of it interfering with the joy he felt during his hunts, we will never know. Robert Hansen spent his entire adult life hiding who he was, only giving away enough information to provide him with the upper hand in any given situation. He formed relationships with others based purely on what those relationships could provide him, and he used his appearance and mannerisms in his favor because he felt so uninteresting that he could escape being seen in almost any situation. The reason that we do not know how many victims he took in his lifetime is because Robert did not wish for us to know. The reason that one of his victims remains entirely without identity, even after all this time, is because Robert did not want us to know who she truly was. He needed to have absolute control over all information in his life, or he no longer felt comfortable. Even when his honesty could have helped people, even when his honesty might have helped himself, he chose to keep everything a secret rather than risk the idea of being understood by others. We will never know who Eklutna Annie was in real life. We will never know how many dead women live in a shallow grave scattered across Alaska who are yet to be found, or how many of the bodies that have been found across the state were thanks to his handiwork. We will never know any of these things because Robert did not wish for us to know them. So.
What a powerful thing at the end. Just sick. And the fact is, it's like he still wins in the end. He still got what he wanted.
Yeah. Hopefully no other case ends as bad.
It's just a really
weird... I like when
there's... It's a very weird feeling.
I don't like it.
I don't know. This is a very weird feeling at the end of this versus other cases. It's just...
I really hope we never see one like this again.
Even at the end of Rodney's thing, I just didn't really feel the way that I feel now. Just very weird.
No, it's because he had control his entire fucking life. I mean, granted, when he was a kid, he didn't. His dad had control over him. But the second he moved out, he had control over everybody.
And that's everything. When you, as an adult, you acknowledge you had trauma and you get help.
Exactly. And he didn't get that. He like...
No, he liked it. He liked being in control.
Yeah, it was like he literally just took his dad's spot. But his dad wasn't this bad. His dad didn't kill people. His dad didn't
kill people or rape people. And
yeah, I know.
I don't know. What a bizarre thing. It's just the fact that, yes, there was victims, but it's the fact that it's still the unknown, and we never will know. And I think that's a very, like, unnerving feeling, and that's kind of how we're leaving this. It's kind of like, we just don't know. And that's the shit part. Like, this is a very crappy feeling.
It is. I'm sad it's over. I wish there was...
It's bittersweet. I'm happy it's over because I don't know how much more I can handle.
Yeah.
But it's also sad because it's like, there's so many more questions, and we just don't have the answers. And we may never will in our lifetime.
No.
It's just sad.
I just wish you got a harsher sentence, and I wish the press was there, and
I wish there was no unknown victims.
I wish they could have abused them till he, like, said some stuff, like put burn mark, like put cigarettes out, whatever, just to get him to say something.
I just wish there was no unknown people, and everybody got what they wanted at the end of this, and I don't know, this is just a very weird feeling.
Yeah, I don't like it.
I don't even know how to process this, I guess. What a bizarre thing. I definitely will be thinking about the unknown.
Me too.
Woman. I will be thinking about her from time to time.
Yeah, me too. I hope she's happy in the afterlife. And
yeah, that's all I could ask for.
Be nice to get her name on a grave, instead of Eklutna Annie or Jane Doe. Next week, we've got Drew coming at you to talk about the shoe fetish slayer. I think I said that weird. Shoe fetish slayer. There we go, with A.A. Rod. But until then, I'll be missing you all because I will not be here. It'll just be Drew and Ariel. But I'm going to be sad until his case is over.
I don't know if I can ever miss you guys to an extent because I'm always here with you.
Yeah. But we love ya. And then, Ariel will holla at you next week.
I'll holla at you next week. See you then, peeps.
Deuces.